Hello everyone, and welcome to our event. How are you feeling today, team? Today, we will talk about mental health, and in particular, obviously, mental health in the workplace. So the World Health Organization defines mental health like a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities to learn well and work well, and contribute to their community. If we go to the next slide, we can see that according to the WHO, in 2019, 970 million people were living with mental health disorders. Mental health disorders account for 1 in 6 years lived with disability. People with severe mental health condition can die 10 to 20 years earlier than the general population. And obviously, as expected, having a mental health condition can increase the risk of suicide as well as experiencing human rights violation. So all of these, I think, makes it very clear that the economic and social consequences of mental health disruption, let's say, are enormous. And yet, despite many mental health conditions can be effectively treated at relatively low cost, health systems remain significantly under-resourced, and treatment gaps are present all over the world. And on top of that, obviously, people with mental health conditions often also experience stigma, discrimination, and human rights violation. So before I present our panelists today, I would like to go quickly closer to home here in Luxembourg for a couple of figures. So if we go to the next slide, we see some data that are actually pulled from the report of the Chambre des Salariés. So it's a report across 10 years, and it's a survey across employees from 2014 to 2023. I like this survey very much because obviously it takes into consideration also a period that we all, I guess, remember very well, which is COVID, so 2020, 2021, and a little bit beginning of 2022. As you can see from these graphs, so here indicates the quality of work index, which includes a number of metrics on its own. Obviously, you can see that there is a decrease, a deterioration across COVID years, so 2020 and 2021. I would probably say that's not particularly unexpected, and an increasing fork, of quality of work perception from workers that are allowed to work in a hybrid flexible mode versus all the others. I think the point that I would like to highlight there, and that we will see even better in the next slide, is that despite there's been a deterioration during COVID, and you can see that there is a trend of sort of recovering, the situation hasn't recovered yet compared to what was before COVID. So if we go to the next slide, you can see some key indicators which are related, which are called basically positive indicators and negative indicators. So the first graph is actually satisfaction on the work, motivation at work, and general well-being. And the negative ones are conflict between private life and professional life, burnout, and health issues. I think, these graphs, they present a very clear picture, which I would say is fairly consistent. And once again, you can see there's been a sharp deterioration across COVID years. And while we can think the situation is actually, let's say, slowly improving, we are not any close to what it used to be. So once again, I think we can see why mental health is such a topic of importance. And for this reason, and without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists today. Petra Buderus. Petra is a qualified occupational psychologist that currently works at ASDF, which is the Institute of Occupational Medicine in the tertiary and financial sector in Luxembourg. With over 3 decades of expertise, Petra has fulfilled roles such as HR director and consultant, senior coach, trainer, and psychological counselor. Welcome, Petra, and thank you for being with us today. Andrew Buonocore. Andrew has worked across Europe on the IT side of financial services for 25 years. He was co-lead of the mental health network at Eastcox and is currently filling a similar role at Liberty Specialty Markets. Andrew has been a mental health first aider since 2019. Thanks for being with us today, Andrew. Dr. Cornelia Roeskau. Cornelia is the COO and member of the board of directors of SOMPO European legal entity. With over 20 years of management and business development experience, Cornelia has held senior leadership roles in Luxembourg, Germany, and France. Prior to joining SOMPO, she was managing director and member of the board of directors at Globality Health, and she developed the German market activities of the French TPA and brokerage firm Henner Group before that. Welcome, Cornelia, and thank you for being here. So jumping into our discussion, my first question would actually be for Petra. As a professional of mental health, what do you observe in terms of number of consultation for mental health conditions? And do you actually see like real life, let's say, experiencing what we saw in the graph before? So any connection, positive or negative, with what COVID has left behind?
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for the question. It's not an easy question because I think we have to look a little bit in since COVID. So yes, we have observed all mental health workers. We have seen that with COVID we had many more demands from people because it was a totally unexpected situation for so many of us, not only for our clients and patients, but for us also. We do remember that. Since then, and your numbers have shown it very well, we do have finer measures on what is the mental health state of people, and still research is going on. What is the exact impact of COVID or not? What we can imagine is that, of course, COVID as a sickness, as a global event of a major impact, very stressful for people because they didn't know what was happening, has impacted people very heavily. And if you have had situations in the family where people have died or have been very sick, of course, I don't think this is totally over for all of us. And some are still struggling with the symptoms. If now I travel in time and I look at today, and if you look backwards, is that I think what we have to take into account when we speak about the mental health, are we feeling well today, is that a lot of other things have happened. COVID, for example, so the situation has has kicked off the acceleration of home office. Of course, we had it before, but it kicked off and suddenly it had to happen, and organizations were not ready with the impact, and we can perhaps speak about it later, that has on how people feel well in their teams, right? So it was that, but since then other things have happened. Wars, climate crisis, things that were there before, but much more intensive, and AI coming more and more to the workplace. So if I don't go only on numbers, is it more or less? I would say, however, it is more, but it's the complexity of things that have happened that people do not understand, and things that have happened in the last years and are still happening where people do not have the experience. Like, I know this has happened before. I know how to cope because the generations that are at work now haven't had this experience, are not there. Those experiences are not there. And the third point of resilience, because that are the three leverages for resilience, is like, I understand what's happening to me. Second is, I have experience in this. And third is, it's meaningful. And I think there is where we are struggling for the moment with this multitude, that we do lose the meaningfulness of work for people. And we try to adapt the environment, the people to the environment, which is really changing quickly instead of doing the other way around. And that we hear more and more in our consultations, that it is a lot that where people cannot leverage experiences from themselves or from their family. That is what I would say as introduction, where I would say it's understandable that within organizations, people are, and as individuals, that people are less confident, perhaps with a less positive outlook into life, and for some getting really stressed with all that and going down into a drain of tiredness, of exhaustion, and perhaps other mental health issues. Yes.
Thank you, Petra. Thanks for this insightful answer. I would like to follow up on that, starting with Cornelia, maybe going around our panelists. And it's really what was mentioning, obviously, what Petra was mentioning about also hybrid work and, like the three, let's say, the recipe for resilience, so the three key factors for resilience. Have you noticed a difference across generation?
Yes, I totally think I do notice this. It's I would even go that far. I would say currently, whenever I interview, or we as an organization interview people, I feel that the question about how many days of work from home do you as an organization allow? This is really, well, of course, it's a question that before the pandemic never anybody asked, and now it seems to be really very, very important. And of course, as a representative of the, let's say, old work before COVID, I have to admit that I'm sometimes surprised by this, how important this work from home is becoming to people. And also because in my personal history, there were 2 times in my career where, due to my job, I had to work from home. So I was responsible for a market that was in a different country than my employer. And I found it extremely challenging. And I have later in my career seen people, team members, who transformed from very motivated and really in good and normal health, mental health also, who really suffered from this loneliness of remote work, and who started then, where I really started to notice transformation in behavior. And so I do, of course, we as an organization, of course, we fully support remote work. And personally, I don't have issues. I trust all my team members that they work as efficiently as they do from home as they do in the office. I'm sometimes only worried that exactly it could have a negative impact on their mental health. And this is really why I feel it's so, I don't know, is this remote work good for people, or is it not? It's because also the pandemic, for me, looking back now, had one positive thing. And for me, the positive outlook of the pandemic was that I realized what is really important for me personally in work. And it's very basically being with people. I love this so much. I love going to the office. I love being with clients and partners and the team. And it was funny. During one of our family dinners during the pandemic, I think I must have been going on and on how terrible it was for me to work from home, and how I could not understand how people are so happy to work from home. And then one of my daughters said, "But mommy, have you ever considered that not everybody is as happy as you are when going to the office?" And this was so eye-opening for me, because actually I had not. Sounds ridiculous maybe, but I had not thought about that. And this was good and helpful for me to understand that indeed we are not all the same, right? Only because for me as a manager, it is the nicest thing to go to the office. I have to, it's important to be in a good, to also be able to create a positive environment, for me to always remember that other people might have other needs. So yes, I think we are in a debate, in a phase of, and again, I would love to give the question back to Petra. Do you have an answer to, is work from home good or is it not good for people's mental health?
I have an answer. I'm very happy to hear from a top manager saying that this understanding that we are all different, right? Now I am absolutely aware that no organization can be run with really paying attention to how everybody individual would like to be managed or would like to function. Is it good? Is it good then? So what could be, how could we see perhaps groups in that? Well, once again, there are different researches, and one of the most recent one, and that is perhaps because you were speaking about elder generations, and I can hook on that we supposedly the elder generations do not so much or do not cope well with home office, and that young people would. There is a recent research, I think, was run from a university in Australia, who came up with that. In that research, the result was that actually elderly people or the higher generations were coping well because they knew how the organization was running. They knew how the organization ticks. And the younger people, when they joined, and that is what we have observed really during the pandemic and the lockdown, would have much more difficulties to get a feeling, right, through this screen on how does an organization run, what's the culture, how does my team runs, and how do my colleagues run. So but the others, they did, the more elderly. Afterwards, again, as you said, we don't tick in the same way and we don't have the same conditions of working from home, perhaps, right? Depends on the space that you have. For these reasons, what I think always, and what I try to bring over as a message is what people can deal with if there is a frame. I'm not saying processes, procedures in the detail, but where is a clear frame on when can I benefit, under which conditions, how does it have to be communicated? And I think that is a work that needs to be done by all organizations to find out with their mission also and what they are working on, what is a frame which is shared and which is understood by everybody, so that it can work well. That is what I would answer to your question, Cornelia.
I would jump in as well at that point. I think it's. I mean, I would classify myself as an older worker, and once we were forced into lockdown and working from home, yeah, I initially thought that this is the greatest thing ever witnessed, because if I look back and the daily kind of grind of sitting on a train for an hour and looking at the same face on everyone on the train around me, and kind of, why are we doing this every day? It's because there was no other way. And you used to get occasionally a company, in one country would say, we have run an experiment where we made everybody work from home and here are the results. But it was always going to take a really global event like the pandemic to force such a wide and broad kind of review of the way that we work. And it forced us also to look at the needs of different types of people and accept the fact that we are different and need different things. I would be quite happily sitting in one room in the house that's dedicated, for work, and I would be on a Teams call, and you would have much younger people who actually had just joined the company and never even been to the office, never met anyone physically in person, joining from a one-room accommodation. You could see their bed in the background, and it's embarrassing almost that I realized things are very different for lots of other people. And so as well-being networks, I was at a different company at the time, we really moved into high gear to try and cover that breadth of experience and understand that some people will be happy that they don't have to go to the office. Some people will not be happy. But then, Petra, you mentioned that we don't really know the kind of long tail effects. We also had to manage the period of time when we were transitioning back to the office, where offices were open, we were socially distanced. Some people had issues around returning to that kind of environment. So I think the pandemic, in a good way, forced us to reflect on what may be the best way of working, bearing in mind that the answer might be different for different people?
Thank you. Thanks for taking this round on this question. I think it's very important, and I would like to highlight one of the comments that has been, let's say, stressed out by all the three panelists, that basically the consideration of different personality and different personal situations. So moving to the next question, obviously there is a lot of discussion, especially with what I was saying at the beginning, also regarding the WHO, regarding detection and prevention of mental health issues, both in the workplace and in general in the wider society. So going specifically to the workplace, the question that I have is that, very, very briefly, what can employers do to create a good working environment? And among, like these, if we can't prevent, for example, the so-called bad bosses, how can we really tackle these challenging situations that, can have, research shows they can have significant impact on the mental health of the employees? Petra, would you like to kick us off for this question?
Yes, so I'm working in a prevention environment, right? We are responsible. Our mission is to help employers and employees to rather think of prevention than of intervention, right? And I would say, so what you were speaking about working conditions, I would say it's the same things, the same actions that employers, organizations have done or should have done for a long time, even before the pandemics, to create a environment where the working conditions are right. So it comes back to working condition. This hasn't changed. I come back afterwards to the mental health discussions, and these working conditions, when it comes to what can you do, is looking at the psychosocial risk factors. So psychosocial risk factors is the workload doable? Is the communication right within the organization? Is there enough support and mutual health? Is there enough autonomy in the work for people so that there is meaningfulness? I mentioned it before, so that they see a sense in their work, right? And are the values right? And are the values shared and understood? And is there justice within the organization? And in today's today we speak much more about, and that goes closer to the mental health aspect also, is it safe to speak up? So mental health prevention needs absolutely this possibility of being able to speak up if there are situations which are either just difficult to live, or which are not correct if we think of mobbing, or which are not correct because we think of not being able of disconnecting from work. So that sounds a little bit negative, but I would always say a risk factor, when it's well dealt with, becomes a protective factor for mental health prevention. That is what an organization can do. And well, an organization is an addition of all people, so we can all contribute to the communication, to acting along the values of society, not to forget, but also of the organization, of being supportive, of having an open eye and open ear, and speaking up when necessary. Because then, at least from the organization can become, within the well-being and the work-life balance, right, a supportive factor, even if perhaps outside it gets difficult. Why I'm starting like that is because I think that is where we should focus on. I always say energy flows where attention goes, rather than on how do we prevent mental health issues, because that is an outcome, but that is not the objective or the role of an organization. However, this being said, and seeing the numbers, I think it's super great, and it's a good achievement that it's talked about, that we talk about it today, because it's exactly what we try to achieve, that it's no longer something which is stigmatizing. One of my colleagues here spoke about not having a stigma, and it's no longer stigmatizing, but that it becomes a topic that we can talk about and that we all can work and contribute to work on. And I think Andrew, who has one of the specific roles and experience and the training of mental health first aider, knows a lot of practical cases within the organizations and experiences that he can share on this.
Yeah, I do, and I've been a mental health first aider for a while, and the thing that I've seen work really well. In fact, I would say the most important thing in terms of what managers can do to improve the well-being of people that they work with. I'll give you an example from I looked through my CV. It's 12 years ago. So a company I was working for was very pleased that they had made available a series of quiet rooms, and these were kind of darkened rooms, not completely dark, but they had comfortable seating where you could go in, you could spend half an hour, listen to a meditation or listen to some calming music, or just take yourself away from the work environment for a short period of time. And so, as a team, we were quite interested in using these, and the boss of our small group joined the conversation and said, "So, is anyone going to use the baby rooms?" And then that's it. That kills it dead. Like, no one in the team is going to consider using something that the leader of that, or the people leader of that team, describes in such a manner. So I think if companies and organizations had only one thing that they could do, I think it would be to make some kind of mental well-being training mandatory for anyone who is responsible for people, anyone who has even one person reporting to them. I think it's absolutely essential that that they receive some kind of guidance and training on how to work with team members, how to understand, that point that was made earlier on, that people are different, people have different requirements, and also to kind of start to observe, when we're not all in the office and you can't observe people face to face, there are definitely observations on teams that are important, because this is one of the areas, as was working from home, where a team, regardless of the size, their view is really determined by what the manager thinks. Because if a manager doesn't trust the team to work from home, then nobody works from home. That's at least how it used to be. If a manager doesn't believe that people can be affected by having a difficult time at home, then no one is going to admit and open up and discuss the fact that they're having a difficult time at home, and that's affecting how things are at work. So that top down kind of trickle, I think the view has to be from up going downwards, because it's so much of what a company does is driven by what leadership does, and their behaviors especially.
Thank you, Andrew. Cornelia, as we are talking a lot about company leadership, obviously you are a company executive. So I just wanted to put you a little bit on the spot here and ask, what are your considerations on everything that is being discussed so far?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And indeed, I'm happy about Andrew's example, because actually when you said, well, okay, we have the bad bosses, we have all experienced, and we've all seen, right? So the bad of the employee, but the employee starts to do with themselves. Right? Who leaves the company first, the bad boss or me? I was spontaneously thinking, well, bad bosses, leadership is something where training also helps, right? So you can indeed, I think there are a lot of things that also Petra mentioned. I think the basics, right? The company has to put in place good policies, anti-harassment, whistleblowing, to make sure that the workplace etiquette is well understood and implemented by everybody. It's also, well, of course, the diversity and inclusion are things that the company not only welcomes but wants. Really, this is so. I think that values are something that I think are so. Values really as company values, something where you really sit together and said, what are our company values? How can we define them? And then how can we make that they are also applied and lived? This is a lot of things. And I think nowadays it should be a common understanding. I think, and maybe I'm just lucky that I always worked, and of course in my current environment, but also in others where I've been before, where these things are implemented and really taken care of. And then again, in the leadership, all kinds of all levels of leadership, I think it's important that the that the leadership team adheres to these values. And then it's the tone from the top, right? When I joined my group some time ago, I remember my group CEO saying to the overall global leadership team, I don't want company politics here. And I spontaneously thought, well, this is a very honorable wish, and I'm happy that he wishes that, but how can you control that, right? How can you influence it? And then he went on and explained what he meant, like that he expected the leaders to speak up if we weren't in agreement, for example, with his strategy that he had just presented. That, like, if nobody speaks up, I expect that nobody of you then later, when you drink coffee, start gossiping about how poor my strategy is. It's not exactly the words he used, right? But I found this great. It really has to come from the top, and then it has to be lived. And I have a lot of discussion also with friends when I said, for example, something that I experienced personally as very stressful in my past when I was younger were what I called the nocturnal email ping pong, right? A long time ago, I worked in an organization where the leadership started to send emails around at, I don't know, 12 or midnight on a Saturday night. And I remember that I woke up at night and I looked at my phone and I saw all these emails. And I thought, gosh, maybe if I want to show that I'm also somebody who really wants to participate, I have to answer. But then I thought, well, like, I'm absolutely not in the situation to do that at night. And after I changed the organization, it took me 2 years of detox, email detox, to no longer take spontaneously my phone during the night when I woke up and check if somebody was expecting an email from me. And so when I then started to have leadership functions, I promised myself that I would not send around emails to team members on the weekend, for example. So of course it happens that I work. Of course, sometimes I have to write things on the weekend, but then I wait with sending them until Monday morning. And of course, it does not mean that I would not answer to my boss on the weekend. Of course I would, but I don't want to put any pressure on my team members. And I had a colleague who said, oh yes, but then a friend, actually a former colleague, who said, oh, but don't you fear that your team members think you are lazy? But this is possible. I don't know if they believe I'm lazy. I hope they don't. But I don't care. I don't want to cascade down an atmosphere of pressure and expectations where people think they have to reply at whatever moment of the day and the night, only to be well seen by me. And yeah, so I think there are, and again, what I said initially is, for me, it was a big step to understand what is important for me, and then to realize that I can't expect everybody to be the same way. So when Andrew said, oh, for him, the beginning of the pandemic was working from home was a great moment. For me, as I said, it was a horrible moment. But then, of course, I come from I'm an extroverted person. I come from a sales background. I love being with people. I fully understand that people who work on, I don't know, an actuary or somebody from legal or in IT, who really work best when there's silence around them and where they can concentrate on their task. But this is, of course, a total different need. And I do think that modern leadership should take differences into account.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Cornelia, for your extensive and complete answer on this question. I would like to go back a little bit to Andrew and this experience as a mental health first aider. So Andrew, would you like to drive us a little bit through, how it started and, like what it entails and provide a little bit more details around that?
Yep, no problem. Happy to. So I've been a mental health first aider for 5 years, since 2019, and the company I worked at the time had a mental health first aider program, and I just thought it would be interesting and useful to do. So in the UK, at least, there's an organisation called Mental Health First Aid England, and they manage and provide all the official training to gain your qualification. I did a 2-day course. They do warn you up front that the training can affect people in different ways, and I would probably say I was facing some issues at work at the time. I had one of those bad bosses, and I think probably for the next 2 months after the course, it felt like quite a dark time for me. I think it just coincided with the course. But here at Liberty, we have a list of about 45 mental health first aiders, and so in my 5 years, I've dealt with a series of issues, and they range from people going through suicidal thoughts, issues at home, issues with family members going through problems of their own, and even things like I'll call them external pressures. So financial pressures, just after Christmas, where people are struggling with managing the money that goes in and the money that goes out. We also deal with questions like that, because it's important that all of those factors, not just work factors, feed into how someone is feeling at a given point in time. And if they need some kind of help with that side of things, then the mental health first aiders are there to help them. So we publish the list of mental health first aiders, and it's part of my email signature. So people have the option. If people look at me and say, "Oh, Andrew's a mental health first aider," if they need to talk to someone, they have the choice of saying, "I know Andrew, I trust him and I like him, I want to talk to him," or "I know Andrew, I don't trust him, I don't like him, I want to talk to someone else." You can speak to someone you know, or someone who you've never spoken to before. And the underlying principle of mental health first aid is exactly the same as medical first aid. You're not a doctor. You're not there to cure anyone or fix anything. You're there to stop the situation from getting worse. So from a mental health first aid perspective, the key thing I found is to try and make the discussion you're having with someone the lowest point, to offer an idea of like, I understand what you're going through. I know people, or I felt this way myself before, and then offer some signposting to resources and people and organizations that can help them directly with the issues that they're facing, kind of lift up from there. And actually, I think the only issues I've ever seen with mental health first aiders is where the person has felt like they need to almost manage to the very end resolution their interaction with someone. So by all means, we encourage that you follow up with further information, but also we have to point out that you need to try not to get emotionally involved. You don't want people to become dependent on you individually, because you are really trying to offer them guidance and offer them a direction where they can gain some help and get some kind of improvement themselves.
Thank you, Andrew. And does the mental health first aid course, would you rather think, like obviously we're mentioning the UK one, that is anyway, like applicable worldwide? And, like, have you ever found yourself providing also, like mental health support to colleagues that are based, like in other countries?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. We have done, and actually, one incident that really sticks out in my mind was I like to go and watch Italian football, and in Italy, and I was on a weekend trip with my cousins in Milan, and I used to visit Milan regularly for work when I was working for an Italian company, and I had my cafe that I used to like to go to. I went there super early, and there was a woman who was clearly undergoing some kind of crisis. So I got the bar owner to call the police. I sat down and spoke to the person and just kind of try to understand the situation so that I could explain to the police when they got there. And luckily they were there very quickly. So yeah, it's a skill, it's a training, a learning that is applicable worldwide. But there are official organizations. I believe there's a pan-European organization, but most countries have their own organizations that offer the training and the certification. I know there's one in Luxembourg for sure, and actually we have in the 5 years that I've been involved in mental health first aid, we have had lots of questions from other offices, from European offices, as to whether they can do the UK qualification and whether that would be valid. I mean, it's not a legal requirement at all, so there's nothing to stop people from doing the UK qualification, but it signposts UK specific resources. So it's absolutely the best way forward, that if an individual or an organization is interested in either personally becoming a mental health first aider or implementing a list of first aiders within an organization, just a quick Google search for mental health first aid, and then your country will find an organization that you can turn to that will guide you through the process, and whatever that will be in your own locality.
Thank you, Andrew. We will go back. Oh, sorry,
if
go
I can
ahead.
add something to this quickly, because actually it was during the preparation for this, or the discussion that we had for this exchange today, that I first heard of the existence of mental health first aiders. Right, I hadn't. Then I started talking with both my peers here in Luxembourg, and of course also internally in my group, and I discovered we are, for example, implementing this now in the UK as well. And I found out that there are more and more bigger organizations who propose these or who set up these trainings. And I was actually surprised about myself, but I had not. I must have undergone hundreds of health trainings, right, in the company about what happens if your printer starts to burn, but it had never even occurred to me that there is also something like and it seems so obvious once you understand that this exists, and so important. So I will subscribe to one of these trainings here in Luxembourg. This is for sure already, and I'm happy that we discussed it today and share about it so that more people can set up something like that.
I would like to add something on this also. I think, as I said, I think that is a very useful tool. At the same time, in addition, I think not everybody needs to become a mental health first aider. I think what should be done also, and to support managers, because there's a lot of pressure on, as we say, lead by the top, but at the same time that puts pressure also on the management level, is to make kind of awareness trainings, perhaps on a lighter level, not so much into depth of the details of the different mental health conditions, but really on what can I expect, what could be the most frequent conditions, and especially what can I expect of somebody who might suffer from depressive episodes or who might come back from burnout, and what can I expect, how should I communicate. And so this is what we do, and what we provide, some kind of awareness trainings for managers. Again, like a mental health first aider, they are not there to treat anything or being responsible for the well-being, but that they are aware and that they can do a good self-management and understand what's happening and going on. I think these two things are complementary, and I think that is good when organizations can think of both possibilities.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense. Thank you to all of you for your intervention. We received quite a few questions from the audience, so I would like to pick up a couple of those. And I will start with something that actually Cornelia was referring to before when she was telling the story about the late night emails. And the question that we receive is, how can we implement something like an email detox or a tech detox at a more formal level, especially as we became more and more dependent on technology post-COVID? Petra, would you like to start on this?
I'm a little bit smiling because forgive me for that, but is how can we implement that? I would sometimes just answer, you have to implement it. You have to do it, right? Here in Luxembourg, but I know also that in other countries there are laws also on the right to disconnection, which is overprotecting once again, or is confirming again the right to working hours, right, or the definition of clear working hours. I think what needs to be done, and that is a little bit what at least in Luxembourg the law is encouraging, is that there are concretely and within a time frame discussions which are held on what is needed, what can be let out, and what could be the actions that we can do, what professions are concerned, how do they recover their time if they had to do, if they needed to be connected, and to come back to basics of what are the contractual conditions, and then also to discuss what is our perhaps global functioning of our organization is demanding, and then implement it and walk the talk. There's not so much else, in my opinion, but I'm happy to discuss else to do on this. At least this is what the law encourages. And then there, Cornelia, I've seen it's just like, of course, there are some best practices, and that is interesting sometimes to look at it, and some creative things. And I think it's interesting to come from the top down, but also from the bottom up. Often people do have solutions, very practical solutions. And the very last point that I would do is it's the responsibility of the organizations and our own responsibility, because I just throw that into the room, but I think we all do use our tools also outside of work, or consult sometimes our tools during work for things which are not related to work. So it's a double responsibility and a double reflection to lead on how much do I want, how much do I clarify that within the organization, but to the individual, how much do I want to be dependent on behaviors which are all the time in the hyper connectivity.
Thank you. Cornelia, you wanted to add something on that?
Yes, very quickly, because again, I'm fully aligned with Petra here. For me, there are two elements. So one is indeed the regulation, right, to disconnect. Of course, it depends on the country where the person who raised the question is based. In a lot of the European countries, this is necessary. And then there are technical solutions, right, that hinder, for example, to download emails to the mobile devices after a certain hour of the day or of the evening. And there, I think this is a mixture between the management. Of course, it's a management decision. Then HR and IT, probably legal, would need to be involved. Maybe the staff delegation, really, to find as of which level, hierarchical level it is, depending on which job, right? If you are, I don't know, we are all insurers. If we are dealing with health insurance, and there are people who might get a call at night because there's an emergency cover letter to be sent out, then it's of course in the interest of several people that this person is not blocked, right? But in other cases, so I think this is a more legal HR decision. And then I also think it's a lot of company values and talk, right? In the majority of the cases, managers are not inhuman, right? The majority want to have a happy team and want to the company to function well. So I've made the experience several times in my life that if the situation is for whatever reason uncomfortable for the individual, raising it and asking if there is maybe a solution for the team. I remember when I was very young, I joined a team that had the habit to start team meetings at 5 in the afternoon until they started really to be on the topic that the meeting was for. It was close to 6, and I started to panic because I had to pick up my children at kindergarten. And I went to see the manager, said, I'm on a trial period. I will not be able to stay if this is really the company culture here, because I will be panicking every second day each time you invite for meetings. There's a reason for the meetings to start so late. And he thought about that and said, no reason at all. So he implemented from one day to another the rule that there are never any meetings starting later than 4. I would have left the company otherwise, right? And it was so easy that I always encourage, but talk to your managers, talk to your colleagues, and say, and openly say what is important for you, what you can offer, and what is the level of help that you would expect your organization to give to you, rather than sitting there being unhappy and saying, oh, I have the shitty manager.
I have a question for Andrew, actually. The audience asked really, it seems quite interesting to the mental health first aider, and they asked you, what's the most challenging and on the other side, the most rewarding moment of being a mental health first aider? And probably connected to that, it's in the same question, how do mental health first aiders take care of themselves? So would you like to share a couple of tips on that?
Yeah, I'll answer the second point first. I mean, it's one of the first points that they cover on the training course is how to kind of check in with yourself, and I think you have to have the ability to understand how you feel at a given point in time, and there's no question that trying to help people who are going through mental health incidents or episodes or stress or anxiety episodes, it can have an effect on you. It's purely logical. I would say that the challenging part is that separation, that emotional detachment, and I think it's Eckhart Tolle that says that the best person who can possibly help you is someone who doesn't care what you're going through, but it's difficult not to care. I would say that the most memorable and kind of challenging incident that I remember, without going into too much detail, was a situation where I wasn't in a position where I could offer any assistance at all. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it was someone that I knew personally. So I was actually traveling down an escalator in Hamleys, the toy shop in London, with my son, when I received the phone call, and it was clear that the person was in crisis, and I just had to say that I can't do anything at the moment, but here's someone who can definitely help you now. So in the way I kind of signposted them, but to this day I regret not being able to help at that point. But there's an example that I can see it for what it was. It was the whole concept of the list of mental health first aiders is that people can choose who they speak to. This person chose to speak to me, and it just wasn't possible for me to help at the time, but there was luckily someone else who could. So yeah, everything kind of worked as it should do. But I think that overall you have to be willing and able to understand your emotions at a given point in time, and make sure that understand what could happen next, and if that's a step too far for you, then you have to maybe step back from the role.
Thank you. I'm mindful of time. We have a few minutes left, and before we close the panel, I would like to pass it to Monica, that is gonna share some information about Luxembourg resources, in particular when it comes to mental health awareness and support. Monica?
Hi, Mavi. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. So thank you to our panelists as well for such an insightful conversation. I'm Monica, and I'll be going through a short list of Luxembourg resources for mental health. This is not exhaustive by any means, but we just correlated some things off the back of the conversation through our prep, and we thought it would be useful to share. So the first thing we'd like to highlight are voluntary organizations or any organizations that offer mental health services, supports, information awareness, upskilling, such as the League, which is the Luxembourgish League of Mental Health. And they also provide mental health first aider courses. So for anyone interested, you can contact them on the email that is on screen. The second and the third, consequently, are crisis lines. And the first we'd like to highlight is the general crisis line for mental health here in Luxembourg. The number is 45 45 45, and they operate 7 days a week. They have some time slots. So from 11 a.m. every day, Sundays and Thursdays until 11 p.m., and Fridays and Saturdays until 3 a.m. Recently, they also started their SOS chat, which is available Mondays and Thursdays from 5 to 9 p.m. Then we have the European Medical Emergency Line, which is 111. Some of you may know the American Emergency Line, 911, but in Europe, it is 112. We've also linked here their website, so you can check out more information in more detail regarding emergency lines. If you're having a mental health crisis or any emergency, you can dial 112 and they can link you to any local hospitals in your area. Then the last two are general registers, where you can find any licensed and registered mental health professionals. The first being the Luxembourgish Society for Psychology, which registers all psychologists and therapists in Luxembourg. And the last being the General Medical College, where you can find all health practitioners in Luxembourg. You can filter for mental health by using keywords such as psychologist, psychiatrist, and therapist. So to round off today's conversation, just a quick note on occupational medicine, since we have Petra on the call today, and we wanted to highlight the ASTF, which is the Association for Health at Work for the tertiary and finance sector here in Luxembourg. And so in terms of occupational medicine, these associations will take in charge, like Petra said, the preventative measures, and they look at everything from physical health, which includes medical checkups, as well as resuming work after medical leaves, and ergonomics, which is incredibly important nowadays as we spend so much time sitting down, to things like mental health, which is today's discussion. And they will have mental health professionals such as Petra available to help. They also offer mental health first aiders for any employers or any individuals that are interested in joining. And we've listed here some contact details. You can always find them through their website, as well as their email and their phone number. But the ASTF also has a newsletter you can sign up to get any news and any last minute information here in Luxembourg. So thank you so much, and back to you, Mavi, to close off.
Thank you, Monica. That was really helpful. And I would like to thank our panelists, Petra, Andrew, and Cornelia, for being with us today. I found it a very insightful conversation, and I'm sure all of us will leave today looking into this more deeply. And thank you so much, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.